On November 5th, we will not just elect new president of the United States. Among many other positions to be filled is the Illinois state representative position from 57th District. And we have a pleasure of talking to a Republican candidate for that position of Illinois state representative in District 57, Mr. Daniel Behr. Daniel, thank you so much for finding time and talking to us.
I'm pleased, honored, and flattered to be here.
Thank you for running, because we need that representation. We need that voice to be heard in Springfield. But before we'll talk about politics, I want to talk about you for a moment. You have a PhD degree that you got in Europe, and among many others, you spent quite some time in European countries, also in Poland.
I did spend time, and I attribute that to the Gestalt, the entire educational process, because by traveling and living in other countries and being in other cultures, Slavic culture actually being part of mine, because my mother is an immigrant from Czechoslovakia anyway, so it's very familiar to me. But I've spent time in Poland, Serbia, Germany, Denmark, where I actually had an apartment for a while.
Wow.
And Sweden, sometime in Norway, Belgium, Netherlands, Spain,
wow.
Austria.
Most of Europe.
Most of Europe.
Was it business or pleasure?
I think it was all, the business was the pleasure. I really enjoyed myself.
And that's the way it should be. And let me explore your Polish connection, because your wife is Polish, right?
And she is indeed, and she's from Bochni.
Wow.
And as is my sister-in-law, and they are well known and prominent in the Polish community. And thank God for my wife. She's a wonderful, wonderful human being, and I'm privileged and so happy that we're together.
Great,
so.
Great. But your background is in business.
Yes, it is. Yes. I actually came from the railway field, and in the 80s, the late 80s, I helped start what's known as a short line railroad. That is a branch of one of the big what they call Class 1 railroads, very large railroad. And it was an excerpt that was then pruned off of the main branch as a small branch.
Yeah.
And in this case, it was a terminal carrier, means it worked within a city, and that city was Minneapolis-St. Paul. And so I really learned a lot, because I wore a lot of hats. I even wrote the revenue accounting program for that, that tracked the movement of cars, whether we would collect money or not. And anyway,
but these are huge undertakings. Just like running a state is a huge undertaking. You have to wear many hats. You have to have expertise from different areas, different fields, to understand what is happening at the state level. So I think that your background in railroad puts you on the right path.
Well, especially in the context of economic development, because we in the state of Illinois need a lot of help. So if you look at it from a railroader's perspective, railroads are looking for industries to thrive, and they're looking for them to develop scale. Why? Because then they ship by rail.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they ship only by the pallet load, or maybe half a truckload, at the most truckload. That's all fine. We all start somewhere. Railroads are looking for an environment to nurture the growth of large industries.
Correct.
So it can generate traffic. This is normal as rain.
Absolutely.
And
what made you go into politics? You were successful in business. You have a lot of expertise to offer in that area. And all of a sudden you decide to be active, take charge in what's happening with the politics.
The underlying sort of philosophical underpinning is that I like to be engaged in something. I don't want to be a mere observer.
Not just a spectator.
I don't want to be a spectator. What's the problem here? So you'll have a lot of people that will complain, there ought to be a law. This is a problem. Oh my God, what do we do? Maybe you can do something about it. And so I want to play a role in helping solve the problem and making, or problems, plural, because there are a plurality of problems we have in the state of Illinois, and I want to help. And I want to play a role in it, and I have a very varied background that lends itself to the solution. And by having a PhD in applied economics, I know how to look at the numbers. I'm not going to have any problem in drilling down in granular detail and find out where the problems are. For example, a lot of overhead. We don't need this overhead if you had, I'm sorry, I didn't want to.
Yeah, this fat that could be trimmed right from the balance.
Well, all right, to give you an example, in the state of Illinois, we have over 7,000 small units of government, many of which duplicate one another. You don't need to have that duplication. All right, here's another statistic for you. So let's look at our taxes, our real estate taxes. Well, that's the biggest component of property tax, right? 70, 80%. So now you have to drill down and say, okay, what are the components of that tax? Well, you have teachers and you have administration. So let's think about this. Between 2000 and 2023, there were, I believe, an 8% increase in teachers and a 55%, 55% increase in administration.
Non-teaching positions.
Non-teaching positions, but 6% less students.
Whoa, we have a problem.
But what are they doing? What's going on?
Yeah.
Who's doing what? How many school districts do you need? If you have a shrinking population, okay, oh sure, okay, you can say, oh, the student-teacher ratio is fine. But what about the ratio to administration? All of whom have pensions. And those pensions are underpinned, they're predicated on the faith in Illinois government that the pension fund is intact. But it isn't. Teachers fund, for example, the actuaries will look at the teacher's pension fund and say 40% is the point of no return. It's 38.6% funded. Where's that money going to come from? Well, the money had come from the federal government during COVID times. So during the pandemic, all that money is stopped. Where's it coming from? You know where it's going to come from?
Our pockets.
Our pockets. That's exactly the problem. So this is a core, foundational, fundamental problem that we're going to have. And so what ends up happening, so now taxes go up. What do you think business says? Business says this is an inhospitable environment, and we have high regulations that hamstring us, that consume our time, that we could be directing at generating more business. They say, you know what, this is such an inhospitable environment, we're going. And where do they go? They go to Indiana.
Just across the border. They don't have to move far.
They don't. I have cousins who live in Indiana that tell me there's a housing boom over there. The real estate market is doing very well. You have Iowa, Wisconsin, maybe slightly higher taxes, but a different environment. And where else they're going is the Carolinas, mid-Atlantic states, Florida, Texas. So there's an interesting statistic. And that statistic is that of all the moves and move-outs in Illinois, 65% move out. And where do you get that data? Where that data comes from is there's 4 sources of high credibility. There's Census Bureau, U.S. Census Bureau, there's IRS, there is U-Haul. What's the statistic that's most interesting?
Which direction the trucks are going.
Exactly. It's one-way rentals. That's what they're looking for. And also North American Van Lines. So all of these statistics corroborate. When people leave, there's a message. There's a reason why they're leaving. And this needs to be seen too. And so I hope that of course, that I'm elected so that I can apply the accumulated talents across a broad spectrum of business activities. How can we help solve these problems, keep people in Illinois, and make the economic climate here spiral up and become more robust? That's
honestly, to identify those problems and address them, you need to have that business background. You need to have that business way of analyzing the data and targeting the problem. So let's look at some areas specifically. Let's take them under the microscope, and let's start with the education. You mentioned that already, that there's a problem with how money are being pumped into the education, but it's not the only problem that we face with the education system in Illinois.
Well, we have a problem too. Statewide, we have a problem that you have more and more children that are not reading at grade level Their reading skills, their reading comprehension and writing skills are not at great level, nor are their mathematics skills. Now, the northern suburbs, passable, they're doing okay. Do you really need that overhead, though? And so, from a business perspective, one of the things you look at is overhead. Yeah. But back to the schools, there's a more fundamental underlying problem too, and that is school mandates. What the state is forcing teachers and principals to teach in the context of their, in effect, giving them manifestos.
That's exactly what's happening, right? Those decisions are made in Springfield more and more, not in classroom, not in meetings of specialists, people who should be determining what's being taught, what's put in the curriculum.
Correct. And so what you have now is a scenario where the children are being taught strange theories, shall we say,
yes,
and they're counter to our value system, especially Polish. I mean, my mother is from Czechoslovakia. We have essentially the same culture.
Mindset, yeah.
And we're normal as rain. We are looking at foundational principles, foundational, basic, elementary. Do you learn, especially for preschool and for elementary school, where they should be spending their time and not consuming their bandwidth. They should be learning mathematics, a second language, because their minds are malleable at that age in particular. They should learn language skills, vocabulary, composition, punctuation, cursive. Can you imagine that?
A lot of that is abandoned. Like the cursive is pretty much gone. Spelling is gone in so many schools, and the kids rely on their word processors to underline misspelled words, and they don't even bother learning the proper spelling.
That's right. You and I'm sure we're classically educated. We can look at a document and immediately a misspelled word will pop out instantaneously. But we've developed those skills. Our children should develop those skills too. But what happens to children who are inculcated, that when they're drilled into with this sort of political agenda? What's next? Are they going to report on their parents? Many of us come from a background where this is what happened in communism, and we don't want anything like that. Developing, and this is the beginning. These characteristics, these traits, are characteristic.
And the kids are more and more confused. They go to school and something is promised, something else is delivered, and the kids know about it. Smart kids, we know about it, and they're confused with what they see. Do you think it's doable to put schools back on track and focus on the fundamentals, focus on STEM education, which is the most important in this day and age?
Absolutely. This is it's more than mandatory. It's essential. Why? Because these kids are the pipeline of the future. We're educating children, which are going to be our leaders in the future, and you could actually expand this to a geopolitical position of the United States. And if our kids are not steeped, if they're not familiar with basic, foundational educational information that we should all have, skills, that's the word I'm looking for, skills, what will other nations do? And where will we, the United States, be in relation to the rest of the world?
Exactly, because
leaders.
Yes, they're not civil, and we have to maintain. We have to defend that position.
Yes,
position of a leader, intellectual leaders, technological leaders in the world.
That's right.
Dr. Behr, let's move on to safety. We have to provide safe environment for our children, for our families, in order to properly use the potential that's in them. And again, everybody's complaining that the safe days here in Illinois are gone. The crime is on the rampage. Why? What happened, and what can be done to stop it?
Okay, so core problem is that there's nothing where the police are fine. They're happy to intervene and to arrest those who are commit infractions of the law. The problem is prosecutors will not prosecute. What kind of a message does that give to career criminals, chronic repeat offenders who come and actually go, say, to the northern suburbs, to our area, 57th District, and others? We're not the only, we're not an island. And they come up and they say, well, you know, crime does indeed pay because we're not getting prosecuted. So let me give you an example of what happened under the safety, so-called
Yeah, we'll
Safety
talk
Act.
about Safety Act for sure, because I have a slew of questions about that.
You do? Okay, do you want to?
Yeah, because that was implemented, and no cash bond. So you commit a crime, and you can wait for the trial without posting any bond, right?
Right.
What's your opinion on that?
Well, okay, so what happens? In effect, you get a ticket, right? And ticket says you have to go to court. There's also classification of the crime.
The classification is another thing.
Okay, so I had conversations with a number of police chiefs in our district, and I wanted to get a candid opinion. I wasn't priming them with questions ahead of time. I wanted them to tell me freelance, candidly, what did they think? So I learned, here's a couple of things that I learned in the interim or in these discussions. Two come to mind right away. One is that, did you know that under electronic monitoring, so an offender has a court date and a judge will say, well, we're not going to put you in jail, but we're going to put you under electronic.
Confine you at your home.
Confine you at your home. You don't have to, you don't lose your job. You're not in jail, but you have to show up in court. And you have to be in the immediate vicinity of the home because the electronic device will communicate with it's a transponder, there's technology involved. And if they're gone for more than half an hour, there'll be a telephone call.
There's an alert.
There's an alert that goes out. Cook County Sheriff's Police will call and say, where's so-and-so? Well, he's outside. Bring him in.
Yeah.
They're not in. There's trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, under the Safety Act, that has been increased from half an hour to 72 hours.
Excuse me?
72.
That's 3 days.
Yeah. 72. What could they be doing?
So you can go on a little vacation, come back, and then perhaps the phone will ring.
That's right.
If you're
perhaps.
Perhaps.
Right.
3 days.
3 days. 3 days. And when you, on top of all of that, then they don't even show up in court. There's a lot of that. This is madness.
This is
you cannot do this. And so what would a criminal, if you were a criminal, not that we are, but if just common street sense, requiring almost no analysis, is that if there's no consequence to what you're doing,
exactly,
you're going to keep doing
even if you're caught.
Right.
Then nothing happens.
That's right. And that's exactly what happened.
You mentioned the reclassification of crime.
Oh, here's one. This is another one I learned. Prior to the Safety Act, if one were annoyed with a police officer, didn't like the outcome of an investigation, that if the offender decided to punch a policeman and assault a police officer or a peace officer, right? What would happen in anywhere else in the world, anywhere else in the country?
What will happen in Poland?
In Poland, right? Yeah. I mean, this is the minimum of a felony.
Yeah.
That crime has been reclassified as a misdemeanor. And because it's a misdemeanor, it is a non-detainable offense. In other words, you cannot be arrested and held. Well, this is more madness. Now, why is this good? Yeah. So what will happen? You'll have resistance. Now you'll have police officers who are endangered. And there is under this, there's no sympathy for the victim. The sympathy is within is for the perpetrator. This is complete madness. And so this is a major problem.
And it has to be addressed. The sooner.
It has to be addressed. And the way to do this is by having a vigilant, vigorous prosecutor. There's a fellow by the name of Bob Fioretti who is running, who has considerable experience. But you have to have a serious prosecutor and a prosecution team and office who will follow through. And then crime will go down. That is a deterrent in and of itself.
Awesome.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, let's switch gears to business. Perhaps it's going to be a little bit more optimistic picture,
Mm-hmm.
or is it, because you mentioned that businesses are running out of Illinois
Mm-hmm.
because of regulations, because of taxes, because of the overall climate that's towards businesses here. Why the situation is as is right now, and what has to be done in order to change it?
Well, you cannot have so many restrictive regulations on a business that they're consuming their time complying with regulations. And okay, so now we have a $1. Let's give you an example, just simple economics. A $1 increase in a wage. Well, it's not just $1 additional. What else? There's unemployment insurance, there's pensions, there's all the additives that are in the state of Illinois that operate on a certain percentage on the payroll number, on the base payroll number.
It's like a chain reaction of other fees and payments that go up.
Sure. So instead of $1, it's $1.40 or more.
Yeah.
And just to, without getting too granular as to, what your 941s and so forth, we can talk about that forever, but it's not tax time yet. So, but you get the idea. And this is a deterrent. And not only that, high taxation. Well, there's less free cash flow to build your business. Why? Because you're paying taxes, paying a lot of unnecessary taxes. We talked about real estate tax. That's a huge dissuader. So that's anyway. That's,
I had a conversation earlier today with a gentleman from Texas. He said that the business is booming in Texas. There is, I think, an obvious correlation between Republican-led states, which are booming, which are becoming this land of plenty, land of opportunity, Democrat-led states, just like Illinois, where the businesses struggle. Is that so? Can you confirm that correlation?
I can confirm by a number of discussions I've had. I have, in this campaign, myself, knocked on over 1,600 doors. Well, that constitutes a pretty good sample size in any population. And there are certain tendencies and certain patterns that have emerged. One of the first things that people say, so I'll say to them, for example, okay, here you have the candidate who's standing right in front of you. Tell me what's on your mind. Top of mind, no analysis required. Just tell me what's on your mind. I say it in different ways, of course, but this is the distillation of it. And 60, 70% of them, like that, taxes. That's the first thing they say.
Same thing.
It's consistent. Well, there may be a problem there. If people are saying that right off the top of their head, that's something to take note of.
Illinois is a blue state for a long time. Cook County specifically is a blue county. How easy it is for a Republican candidate to run here for any office?
Well, I have a couple of answers to that. And the first answer is that I think that many have been conditioned by the media to believe that Republicans cannot win. There are countless people who say, oh, you're a very brave man. You're running as a Republican in our district. How can this possibly be? Well, they're for me. And I said, well, here I stand before you. And it is possible. And we have substantive discussions. But they say that. Why? Because they've been conditioned to think that they cannot possibly win. Well, that is a morale problem. And one has to realize that Republicans have a very, very good opportunity. Of all the doors I've knocked on, I have noted, and here's another thing to note. Many of the doors that I've knocked on are classified as independents or, shall we say, light Democrats. The pendulum is swinging let me just say 2/3 to 3/4 of them are leaning Republican. That's a trend. When I see that, I detect that, there's something to say. So, in other words, for all those who would consider a Republican candidate, please do not be demoralized. We can win, and we will win. And my observation, the highest pedigree of data, anyway, is observed data. And this is what I've observed.
Just go out and vote.
Go out and vote, especially number 32.
You ran together with a slate of Republican candidates. You mentioned Bob already, who's a candidate for Cook County State's attorney. What are the names you'd like to mention?
May I? So what we have here is Jim Karras, who's running in the 10th Congressional District, who is a good family man. Also, he's in industrial development. He understands, he and I see eye to eye on economic development and industrial development issues. And then we have Matt Taylor, Cook County judge. He was a Wheeling police officer. Then he became an attorney and now wants to become a judge. Mm-hmm. Well, he's street smart. Yeah, nobody is going to fool him.
Experience on all levels of life.
And then you have Pamela Curran-Smith, who's very, very sharp attorney. I've had a lot of conversations with her. She's incisive. Then we have Maria McCarthy, who has a lot of experience as a prosecutor, and she prosecutes with experience, wisdom, and she knows the system well, and she's of our mind. Mm-hmm. And then Michelle Pennington, Cook County clerk. If anybody's in the 9th District, there's Seth Cohen, ex-Marine, family man, very smart guy, and he is running in the 9th Congressional District against Jan Schakowsky. These are all good. And Mary Cole, she, like Bob Fioretti, is interested in prosecuting, not releasing, not catch and release. That's another way to put it. So, yes, that's
awesome. Dr. Behr, your punch number is 32.
32.
This is where people should look for you on the ballot.
Correct. I'm number 32 in the 57th district.
And let's talk about that. Which area of the county is that?
Okay. And that area is Northbrook, Northfield, Glenview, particularly the eastern half, let's say east of Waukegan Road, all the way going to Loyola, Sunset Ridge. And anyway, it's easily looked up. And then there's parts of the southern part of Glencoe, and Isosceles Triangle in Wilmette, a bit of that. Then there's Prospect Heights, Wheeling, all of Wheeling itself, Buffalo Grove, anything on the Cook County side, parts of Arlington Heights, parts of Mount Prospect, Lincolnshire, Riverwoods. I have 2 precincts each there as well.
There's a lot of Polish communities there. There's a lot of Poles living in that area. So if you're looking for a Republican candidate, you'll find him, punch 32, Dr. Daniel Behr, somebody who has strong ties to Poland, somebody who's married to a Polish woman. So his values are strongly aligned with ours. Look no further.
There is one point that I would want to, I do want to bring up, and that I don't know if we talked about this, but the Democrats tried to put me out of business. They tried to get me off the ballot.
Off the ballot.
Yes, they did. And in late April, what they did is they took what's called a shell bill. In other words, that's a bill that was already approved but had not gone to the floor. It was circulated to the Senate and to the House. This bill looks good, okay, but it didn't go to the floor for a vote. It was nominally for Division of Children and Family Services, DCFS. Okay. Something about how to properly take care of children under state supervision, something to that effect. What they did is they took out that language, kept the title, took out that language, and inserted new language which would prevent me and 17 other candidates from running as state representatives, specifically targeting us.
Yeah, that's
nobody else, but specifically targeting us, saying that, oh, we were slated after the primary because there was nobody in the primary.
I have a few examples of somebody who was slated after the primaries in the elections, and no problems were raised, no red flags.
And would that be Kamala Harris by any chance?
That might be a good guess.
But what happened is that I was slated, according to the law, slated after the primary. And what they are now passing, and what they tried to do, is they tried to change the law in the middle of the election cycle, saying that, oh no, we couldn't write, oh, we couldn't run. But we fought them. We fought them in circuit court in Sangamon County, which is Springfield, and we fought them all the way up to the Illinois Supreme Court, and we won.
Wow, so you're spot on the ballot.
And we're on the ballot. So, but that gives you an indication of the mentality of the maneuvering that goes behind the scenes to try to, in effect, disenfranchise voters here in Illinois. It was actually, if you were to do the calculations, which we did, it would be over 1 million voters would have been disenfranchised by the very party that claims that they're protecting rights, they're protecting democracy. But look what happened, and look how we had to fight. And so it's particularly important with mentalities like that to fight against this. And that, so the Republicans that I mentioned, myself included, of course, would certainly appreciate support and votes from those who are of like mind. And we are philosophically aligned, I suppose is a better way to put it.
And there's a lot of them. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Daniel Behr, your candidate, your Republican candidate for the state representative for 57th district. If you live in the area of Northbrook, Northfield, Wheeling, Prospect Heights, Mount Prospect, Arlington Heights, Buffalo Grove, Glencoe, Glenview, Riverwoods, Lincolnshire, punch 32 is the number you should be looking for. Mr. Daniel Behr was our guest today. Sir, good luck on November 5th.
Lukasz,
thank you for spending time with us.
And thank you. I'm flattered and honored to be here.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all.